There are two types of so-called gun buybacks, voluntary and mandatory. Let's talk about both and the lies that are used to facilitate them. Australia did two major national firearm buybacks, one in 1996, which was called the National Firearms Agreement, and one in 2003, which was essentially a national handgun confiscation. Now, the 1996 Australian gun buyback was based on the false premise that if the Australian government was able to take guns off the streets, it would reduce the number of suicides in the country. Well, the lie was that this gun buyback was to keep people safe. It did nothing to change the already slightly declining trajectory of suicides that had been occurring for years prior. Now, the fact that the government-funded gun grabs in Australia did nothing to reduce the number of firearm deaths drove American gun grabbers crazy. Since then, they've been begging for anything that would validate their current beliefs about the effectiveness of mandatory gun confiscations in the hopes of implementing them here in America. They don't want fact checks. They want someone to agree with them so they don't have to confront the fact that they've been lied to. And they not only fell for it, but they perpetuate the lie. Although the Australian gun buybacks were sold to the public as voluntary, the criminal penalties, fines, and imprisonment for possession of the banned firearms made it obvious that the gun grab was, in fact, mandatory. Many people will argue that even the name buyback is fake because it implies that the government is reimbursing you for something that they sold you in the first place. This creates a psychological effect and an inherent assumption that the confiscation of firearms under the nomenclature buyback is somehow justified. Now, the difference between buybacks in other countries is that they really are mandatory. See, government can get away with mandatory buybacks in other countries because they don't have a Second Amendment, which means they have the ability of unchecked force if they don't get what they want. So let's talk about voluntary gun buybacks. Well, gun buybacks in America are set up to accomplish a couple things. Again, they're held to create the appearance that the government, whether state or federal, is looking out for the best interest of the safety of the citizens. Well, this is far from true. And we know this because disarming citizens through regulations and gun-free zones has only proven to make people much more vulnerable to attacks. American gun buybacks may take a few firearms out of circulation, but do not make a dent in the leftist fantasy of removing all firearms from the population. And they know that. The real intent with American gun buybacks is to condition society to get into the habit of turning in their guns. Now, this is an attempt at creating a similar scenario to the firearm confiscations of communist countries. Gun buybacks in America are specifically for the purpose of training people, conditioning society, and cultivating the habit of surrendering their firepower to the government. And I'll show you how they do it. Let's look at New York, for instance. New York State has been a notorious violator of the Second Amendment. The conditioning and brainwashing of New York State residents is at the top of the priority list of the supermajority Democrat legislature. They understand that conditioning people from a young age is important in shaping society into becoming anti-gun. For several years in a row, a Long Island community held toy gun exchange events for children. Now, the process was for the purpose of getting little kids to line up and turn in their cap guns, water pistols, and rubber band guns in exchange for other toys that the authorities believed were more acceptable. Of course, Mayor Don Ryan and the program's co-chair, Sean Acosta Jr., touted this event as a way of reducing so-called gun violence, as if to imply that 7-year-olds were murdering people with Nerf guns. According to a news release put out by the event's coordinator, they were proud that the Long Island Toy Gun Exchange program was the first of its kind in the region. It appears Mr. Acosta Jr. has been so committed to the conditioning of the minds of these young children that he funded the program himself and donated all the toys that would be handed out in exchange for the toy guns. But the heinous behavior of these officials didn't stop there. In 2018, when some of the children showed up without a toy gun in their hands, they were given toy guns so they could wait in line and participate in the process of giving their toy guns to the authorities.
The village invited 50 kids to today's announcement. Some of the children were given toy guns so they could trade them in for the other toys being given out. The alternative toys were provided by Sean Acosta with the New York Toy Gun Exchange Program.
I want to make sure when you grow up that nothing happens to you.
So parents, if you still have Christmas shopping left to do, police say you should take a toy gun off your list.
It appears that the only important component to this exercise in submissive behavior was for the children to experience physically waiting in line and turning in firearms to the local government. If the goal was simply to remove toy guns from children's possession, why would Hempstead Village trustee Lamont Johnson and the others involved supply the children with toy guns if they didn't already have them? This was nothing more than an exercise in brainwashing children and cultivating obedient behavior that benefits the anti-gun agenda and the culprits behind it. The real shame of all this is that the parents either don't see the brainwashing that's being done to their children on the topic of guns, or they're complicit in it. Global risk analysis and California-based firearms instructor Dennis Santiago argued against the toy gun exchange and said, imposing toy exchanges is a form of child cruelty. He went on to say, it triggers unnecessary stigma for children who would otherwise be unaffected by their elders' phobias. It's a form of passing on fear and prejudice from one generation to the next. Well, he's right. Not only do the gun grabbers want to condition people to behave like subjects, but they also work very hard to condition future generations into becoming anti-gun or simply non-gun owning citizens. They play the long game. They understand the Second Amendment is their major roadblock, but they also understand that if they can cultivate a society of anti-gun people, they can render the Second Amendment essentially irrelevant. Thanks for watching Bullet Points. I'm Dan Wass for Gun Owners Foundation. You can find more Second Amendment content and updates at gunowners.com.